It was a night of reckoning, a moment where the clash of ideas would shake the very foundations of modern society. The room was charged with an energy that was almost palpable. The debate between Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson had already entered dangerous waters, and the audience could sense that this was no longer just an intellectual discussion. It was a war of ideologies, and every word spoken had the power to tip the scales. The studio, a sleek, futuristic space with dark lighting and minimalistic design, seemed to be a perfect reflection of the stark contrast between the two men seated at opposite ends of the stage. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the raw tension. On one side was Andrew Tate, a man who made a name for himself by shattering societal norms and challenging conventional wisdom. His presence was commanding, exuding confidence and defiance in every gesture. Across from him sat Jordan Peterson, calm, collected, and composed, a man known for his reasoned approach to tackling complex issues. Tonight the topic was set, feminism and gender roles. But as the conversation unfolded, it became clear that this was no longer just a debate about ideas, it was about much more. The issue of women's empowerment had become a flashpoint, and Andrew Tate wasn't afraid to stir the pot. "Let's be real, Jordan," Tate said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Feminism is a farce. It's a lie sold to women to make them feel empowered, while all it's really done is confuse them about their place in the world. Women don't need equality, they need respect, and they need to stop pretending they're just as good as men at everything. Men and women are different, and there's nothing wrong with that. The world doesn't need more feminism, it needs more authenticity." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and the room fell silent. Tate's gaze never left Peterson, his eyes burning with intensity. This wasn't just a critique, it was an attack. He didn't just disagree with feminism, he openly dismissed it, reduced it to a lie that was perpetuating societal confusion. His words were a direct challenge to the very principles that Peterson had spent years advocating. Jordan Peterson, for a moment, simply stared back. He was no stranger to controversy, but this was different. The lines were drawn clearly now. There was no ambiguity in what Tate was saying, and in that brief pause, Peterson knew he had to respond, not just to defend his own ideas, but to counter the very essence of what Tate had just laid out. "Andrew, you're oversimplifying a complex issue," Peterson said, his voice measured but firm. "Feminism, at its core, is about equality, not about denying the differences between men and women. It's about recognizing that everyone, regardless of gender, should have the opportunity to live to their fullest potential. We live in a world where gender inequality still exists in many forms, and we can't ignore that." But Tate wasn't listening. He leaned forward, his expression growing more intense by the second. "You've fallen for the trap, Jordan. The world doesn't need more opportunities for women to fail in male-dominated spaces. What it needs is men and women who understand their true roles in society, who embrace the fact that men are naturally leaders, and women are meant to support them, not compete with them." A ripple of shock ran through the audience. Tate's words weren't just bold, they were incendiary. His belief that women should support men rather than compete with them was a statement that would ignite a firestorm. In that moment, the debate stopped being about ideas and became about values, about what it meant to be a man, and what it meant to be a woman in today's world. Peterson's face remained calm, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "This isn't about competition, Andrew. It's about creating a society where everyone has the freedom to pursue their own path, regardless of gender. Women aren't trying to replace men, they're trying to claim their place alongside them, and that's something you can't deny." The words were out, but the tension had only just begun to escalate. Tate was having none of it. His stance grew even more unyielding, his voice rising with passion. "No, Jordan. What you're advocating for is confusion. It's creating chaos, and it's teaching women that they can do everything a man can do, and that's simply not true. We've seen it over and over again. Feminism has led to a generation of women who don't know what they want, who don't know their own value. It's not empowering, it's disempowering. As Tate's words echoed in the studio, the room seemed to grow colder. The audience was at the edge of their seats, some nodding along with Tate's bold statements, others visibly uncomfortable with the fire he was stoking. But one thing was clear: this debate had reached a boiling point, and no one could predict where it would go from here. Would Peterson find a way to dismantle Tate? The tension in the room was palpable as the debate between Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson intensified. The audience, already on edge, could feel the weight of the words exchanged between the two men. It wasn't just a difference of opinion anymore. It was a battle for what society should look like, for what values would shape the future. And it was clear that Tate wasn't backing down. Jordan Peterson, having listened to Tate's passionate diatribe, took a deep breath. The calm exterior he had maintained throughout the debate was beginning to crack under the pressure of Tate's relentless attacks. Peterson was known for his ability to dissect arguments and respond with logic, but Tate's assault on feminism had taken him off guard. He wasn't just challenging ideas, he was challenging the very core of how society viewed gender and relationships. "You keep saying that feminism has created confusion, Andrew," Peterson began, his voice steady, despite the storm raging inside. "But what if it's not feminism that's the problem? What if the issue lies in the fact that we've built a society where men and women are still confined by outdated gender roles? You're advocating for a return to a time when men were the sole breadwinners and women were expected to stay home. But that's not the reality we live in anymore." Tate scoffed. "You're missing the point, Jordan. I'm not saying women should stay home. What I'm saying is that men and women have distinct roles, and there's power in that. Men are naturally leaders, providers, and protectors. Women have their own strength, but it's in nurturing, supporting, and building strong families. That's the real strength that has been stripped away by this feminist movement. Women are told they can have it all, but what happens? They end up burned out, confused, and unsatisfied." The room was silent as Tate's words hung in the air. His arguments were bold, uncompromising, and deeply controversial. But there was something magnetic about the way he spoke, something that made people listen, whether they agreed with him or not. Peterson's eyes flickered with frustration, but he pressed on. "You're simplifying it too much, Andrew. Gender roles are not as fixed as you make them out to be. Men and women can both be leaders, both be providers, both be nurturers. It's not about reducing one group's potential for the sake of the other. It's about creating a society where everyone has the freedom to pursue what they're truly passionate about, regardless of gender." Tate leaned forward, his gaze sharp and focused. "But look at what's happening in the world, Jordan. Men are being told they're toxic for simply being men. They're being told that their drive, their ambition, their desire for success is somehow wrong. We're told that everything a man does to succeed, his strength, his assertiveness, is something to be ashamed of. That's not empowering men. That's destroying them." There was a slight shift in Peterson's expression. For the first time, he seemed to hesitate, unsure of how to respond to Tate's fierce words. But he quickly regained his composure, not willing to let Tate dominate the conversation. "Andrew, I understand the frustration you're expressing, but we need to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The goal is not to silence men or make them feel ashamed of who they are. It's about creating space for both men and women to be who they are without fear of judgment, and that doesn't mean we need to impose rigid roles on anyone." Tate's response was immediate, his voice rising as the debate reached new heights. "That's the problem, Jordan. You talk about freedom, but what's really happening is that society is allowing people to hide behind these false notions of freedom, to ignore the very nature of what makes men and women different. Men are being made to feel like they have no place in the world unless they fit some mold. Women are being told they can do anything a man can do, but all that's doing is leading to chaos. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Tate's words were bold, provocative, and difficult to ignore. There were no half measures in his argument. He didn't just challenge Peterson's views. He attacked them head-on, dismissing the very foundation of what Peterson believed to be true. Jordan Peterson, however, wasn't ready to concede. The reality is, Andrew, society is evolving. The roles that we once saw as fixed are no longer as rigid. Men and women are finding new ways to define themselves. And that's not a bad thing. What's harmful is when we cling to outdated ideas that limit our potential as human beings. Tate shot back, his words now carrying an unmistakable sense of finality. What's harmful, Jordan, is when we allow society to push us into a corner and tell us who we can and can't be. We've created a world where men are told they must apologize for being men, and women are told they must do it all. But the truth is, it's all a lie. We've a band. The studio lights blazed above, casting dramatic shadows over the stage as the debate between Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson reached its boiling point. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, the tension almost suffocating. Tate's words had cut deep, and Jordan Peterson was visibly struggling to maintain his composure. This wasn't just about feminism or gender roles anymore. It was about the very essence of what it meant to be a man or a woman in today's society. Andrew Tate's expression remained unwavering, his gaze piercing through Peterson with an intensity that could not be ignored. You talk about freedom, Jordan, but let me ask you this. What kind of freedom are you offering when you've taken away everything that makes men strong? You want to give women the same opportunities as men, but what you're really doing is dismantling the very foundation of masculinity. Peterson took a deep breath, his brow furrowed in thought. The pressure was mounting, but he refused to back down. Andrew, I'm not trying to dismantle masculinity. I'm trying to ensure that both men and women have the opportunity to be their best selves. It's not about removing strength from men. It's about removing the societal pressures that confine both genders to rigid roles. We have to move beyond outdated ideas and allow people to thrive in whatever way they choose. Tate shook his head, his voice growing louder with each word. You're not hearing me, Jordan. What you're advocating for isn't freedom. It's confusion. You're telling men that they have to apologize for who they are. You're telling them that their natural instincts to lead, to provide, to protect are somehow wrong. And then you tell women they can do everything men can do. But what happens? We're seeing the fallout in real time. Women are exhausted, they're unhappy, and they don't know who they are anymore. This isn't freedom. It's chaos. Peterson's face tightened, his usual calm demeanor beginning to crack. He leaned forward, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. Andrew, I don't believe that's true. The world isn't perfect, and there are certainly challenges. But what you're describing isn't the result of equality or feminism. It's the result of a society that has been slow to adapt to change. Men and women both face struggles, but those struggles aren't caused by women's advancement. They're caused by the societal systems that have failed both genders. We need to move forward, not backward. Tate's laugh was cold, dismissive. Forward? You call what you're describing progress? You want to strip away men's strength, remove their ability to lead, and replace it with this hollow, gender-neutral nonsense? And for what? To make women feel equal? Men aren't the problem here. Society has forgotten what it means to be strong. You think we need equality, but what we need is order. Men need purpose. Women need protection. And we need to stop pretending like everyone can be the same. The audience was on the edge of their seats. The room was filled with tension, every word from Tate landing like a hammer blow. Peterson's usual poise was being tested like never before, and Tate's unrelenting assault on the concept of gender equality was striking a chord with some in the crowd. Peterson tried to regain control of the conversation. Strength isn't about power, Andrew. It's not about domination or control. It's about resilience, responsibility, and the ability to overcome the challenges life throws at us. Men and women alike can possess these qualities, and it's not about limiting anyone's potential. It's about recognizing that we're all human, capable of achieving greatness regardless of gender. But Tate wasn't interested in compromise. His eyes blazed with determination. You're still missing the point, Jordan. Strength isn't just about being resilient. It's about knowing your place in the world. Men have always been the protectors, the leaders. Feminism has blurred that line, and now we have a generation of men who don't know who they are. They're confused, emasculated, and lost. Peterson took a moment, clearly frustrated but still composed. And what about women, Andrew? What about their place in society? Do you believe they should just return to traditional roles without having the chance to create their own path? Tate's response came quick and sharp. I never said women shouldn't have a path. But let's not pretend that feminism has given them a clear one. It's created a culture of competition, where women are told they need to do everything men do, and it's led to confusion and unhappiness. Women were never meant to compete in the same way men do. They're meant to nurture, support, and create families. That's their strength. But you've sold them a lie, Jordan. You've told them that the only way they can succeed is by imitating men. The audience shifted again, some nodding in agreement with Tate's bold stance, while others were visibly uncomfortable. The final moments of the debate were upon them. The room, once filled with buzz and anticipation, now stood in eerie silence. Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson were locked in a battle of ideologies that would not only define their reputations, but also determine the direction society might take in understanding gender, power, and the roles of men and women in the modern world. The audience was divided. Some sided with Tate's forceful convictions, while others adhered to Peterson's academic approach. The debate had escalated, and it was clear this would not end with a simple resolution. Tate's voice rang out again, cutting through the silence. You talk about progress, Jordan, but what you really mean is chaos. You've spent too long preaching equality and lost sight of what makes men and women strong. Men are meant to lead, build, and provide. Feminism has stripped this away and left us with confusion. Peterson's face, once calm and determined, began to show strain. Andrew, I hear you, and I understand your frustration. But I stand by my belief. A strong society allows each individual, regardless of gender, to find their own path. Strength is not about dominance. It's about resilience, adapting, and overcoming adversity. Men and women are different, but that doesn't mean they can't both contribute to society in meaningful ways. Tate's response was swift and unyielding. And that's where we fundamentally disagree, Jordan. You say men and women can contribute equally, but look at the world today. Women are told they can do anything, but it leads to exhaustion and disillusionment. Men are emasculated, forced to apologize for their strength. This isn't progress, it's destruction. Peterson's voice grew quieter but remained firm as he leaned in. I'm not asking men to apologize for their strength. I'm asking for strength to embrace each other as equals, to acknowledge that the world doesn't need to be built on outdated gender norms. The world is changing, and we need to evolve with it. We need a balance where both men and women can thrive. The room held its breath, waiting for something to break the deadlock, but it didn't come. Instead, Tate's unwavering stance resonated with the crowd. Jordan, Tate's voice dropped low, almost conspiratorial. You've spent your life talking about balance. But balance won't save this society. Strength will. We need men who are strong, who lead, who protect. And we need women who embrace their natural roles, not fight against them. We need clarity, not confusion. Peterson stared at Tate, clearly processing his words. This wasn't just a difference of opinion anymore. It was about the very structure of the world they lived in. Tate's words carried power, tapping into a feeling of frustration many felt, especially men, but had no way to articulate. Peterson knew his ideas were rooted in equality and freedom, but Tate's raw, unapologetic energy had begun to overshadow his calm reason. And then, it happened. The room, once split, began to shift. There was a quiet stirring, a murmur of approval for Tate's argument. His certainty, his vision for men's roles, resonated with the audience. Peterson's calm reasoning was no longer enough. Tate's passionate, direct approach seemed to strike a deeper chord. Men and women are different, Jordan. And that's not a bad thing, Tate continued. What's bad is pretending we're all the same, ignoring biology, ignoring the truths that have existed for centuries. Men need to reclaim their place in the world. Women need to stop pretending they can have everything. It's time to stop lying to ourselves. Peterson, finally realizing the battle was lost, took a slow, deep breath. He nodded, acknowledging that this was a fight he couldn't win tonight. Tate's words, raw and undeniably powerful, had struck a chord with the crowd in a way Peterson's nuanced philosophy hadn't. Although Peterson's vision of equality had merit, Tate's unrelenting stance on masculinity had found an audience in a way that Peterson's academic approach had not. Tate stood tall, a quiet sense of triumph in his posture. He had said what needed to be said, and for many in the room, it was exactly what they needed to hear. Slowly, the applause began, growing louder as the crowd acknowledged Tate's victory. Andrew Tate had not only won the argument, but had also solidified his place as a champion for men everywhere. He had turned the debate from a discussion about equality into a declaration of strength, and in doing so, had captured the hearts and minds of those searching for clarity in a world of confusion. As the debate came to a close, one thing was clear. Tate's perspective on gender roles had forever changed how the world would view masculinity and femininity. The cameras faded out, but the conversation sparked by Tate's unapologetic words would continue, echoing in the minds of those who had witnessed this moment.